All right, good afternoon, and welcome to the meeting for the Board of Education. This meeting is being televised live on AACPS TV and streamed on AACPS YouTube channel. This evening's workshop is on Magnet and CTE program audit for the date of February 17th, 2026. I will now turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Madam President. Today we have an opportunity to present to the board and the community our Magnet and CTE programs audit that took place several months ago. As you all know, this was an extensive audit of what we do in our county. And when I tell you this binder was, I don't know, well over 400. How many pages was it? 600 and something. And it was a lot. And so what we have here is an abbreviated presentation with some of the key findings that we believe are very important for this board and the community to hear. We will have our Chief Academic Officer, Christina Catalano, and our Assistant Superintendent, Kevin Hamlin, that will take us through this workshop presentation. So I will pass it over to the two of you.
Thank you, Dr. Bedell. Good evening, President Dent, Vice President Pulliam, Dr. Bedell, members of the board. For the record, my name is Christina Catalano, and I serve as the Chief Academic Officer. And this evening, I am accompanied by
Kevin Hamlin. I am the Assistant Superintendent for College and Career Readiness.
And thank you. So we will begin with our presentation this evening on the findings from our Magnet and CTE programs audit. And as always, at the end of the presentation, we are happy to take all of your questions. So as you know, all of the work in our Division of College and Career Readiness is aligned to our strategic plan, specifically emphasizing our core beliefs, our priorities, and our profile of a graduate. Ooh, I'm not advancing. There we go. In 2007, the Board of Education enacted Policy IB to establish a guiding philosophy for magnet programming in AACPS. Specifically, that our magnet programs are choice programs within and among schools that provide opportunities for students to enhance their educational success through challenging courses that address the academic needs and interests of our students. So while you're listening to our presentation this evening, we would like you to use that lens. This is not a surprise. Throughout our presentation this evening, we will be using a lot of acronyms, so they appear on the slide. Additionally, you have a copy of this slide at your seat this evening so that you can refer to it throughout the presentation. So since their inception over 20 years ago in 2003, our magnet programs have not undergone a thorough and independent review to ensure that they're meeting the needs of our students, our staff, and our schools, that we're allocating our valuable fiscal and human capital efficiently and effectively, that our standards, our curriculum, and our measures of student performance are truly preparing our students to be college and career ready, and that all stakeholders have a voice in the strategic direction of our magnet programming. So, in the late summer of 2024, a grant opportunity presented itself to us through the Maryland State Department of Education. MSDE provided a unique lens for a grant through the U.S. Department of Education's Fostering Diverse Schools grant. One of 3 available pathways presented itself, and our team in CCR applied for and was awarded approximately $100,000 in funding to expand our access to selective admissions programming in AACPS. A portion of that grant funding was utilized to conduct this audit for all of our CTE and magnet programming in AACPS. We did get lucky because about 2 months after the conclusion of our audit, the remaining grant funding was actually recalled. So we actually landed in this perfect window. Based on our existing relationship with its organization and its significance as a national resource for magnet school policy and practice, Magnet Schools of America was selected as our third-party partner to conduct this audit. AACPS has been working with Magnet Schools of America and their technical assistance group, the National Institute for Magnet School Leadership, since 2020. They've provided a lot of professional learning for our schools, for school leadership, for our district leaders, and they help us share best practices related to magnet school programming and to leadership. So a little bit about the way Magnet Schools of America organizes itself, its learning, its award structure, and how it really organizes the work that it does with schools and school systems across the country. They're organized into pillars, and each pillar has 2 standards of excellence. So the diversity pillar is comprised of both student recruitment and selection, as well as equity. Their curriculum and professional development pillar refers to both theme and curriculum fidelity, plus professional learning. Academic excellence is broken down into both instructional fidelity as well as student achievement. Leadership is broken down to reflect both school leadership and district level leadership standards. And then family and community partnership emphasizes both business partnerships and relationships as well as family relationships. So MSA has an annual recognition program that measures school performance against those 10 standards within the 5 pillars. And we have much to be proud of in AACPS. Just last month, MSA announced that 6 of our schools were recognized, and we're going to be celebrating these schools very, very soon, tomorrow. The top Magnet School of Excellence recognition has gone to Meade High School. This recognition is MSA's top merit honor. Magnet School of Excellence, Glen Burnie High School. Magnet Schools of Distinction, Broadneck High School, Annapolis High School for Apex Arts, Bates Middle School, and the Center of Applied Technology South. In recent years, MSA anointed both Lyndale and Old Mill South Middle Schools as certified magnet schools. Other schools receiving distinction awards include Old Mill High School, North County High School, Cat North, South River High School, and Central Middle School. And last year, Cat South's Chef Pam Klink was recognized by MSA as the Region 1 Teacher of the Year. So before I turn things over to Dr. Hamlin, where he's going to review the purpose of the scope of our audit, the audit findings, our response, and some of our short and long-term goals as they pertain to the audit, I do want to highlight for you and the public that much of the presentation tonight is really going to focus on findings that are recommendations and areas for improvement. One of the reasons we sought out the opportunity for this audit is really because of our commitment to continuous improvement. So as a result, at your seat, you do have a supplemental handout that outlines many of the positive findings, the outcomes, and the strength of the audit, as well as positive data trends and awards that we have received in relationship to our magnet programming. But as Dr. Bedell said, binder, over 600 pages. We can't be here till 10 o'clock tonight. And so we chose, in the spirit of continuous improvement, to really focus tonight's presentation on those recommendations and areas for improvement. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Hamlin.
Thank you. So with the support of our purchasing division and the assistance of MSDE, we negotiated a scope of work with Magnet Schools of America that included site visits to all 18 Magnet and CTE host schools. Leveraging their rubric for Magnet excellence, the team from MSA conducted classroom visits, student focus group interviews, reviewed publicly available data, and analyzed both quantitative and qualitative data from assessments and surveys administered throughout the system. On the screen now, you'll see a listing of the 18 schools that were visited during this 4-day visit, to include, beyond our comprehensive schools, our Centers of Applied Technology North and South and Studio 39. In the weeks and months following the audit, the principal investigator for Magnet Schools of America, Ms. Heidi Tarji, visited AACPS and conducted debrief sessions with members of the Division of College and Career Readiness, as well as the entire senior staff. She shared a litany of positive attributes and outcomes stemming from the work of the dedicated teachers, school leaders, and central office partners serving AACPS students. The recognitions from MSA were certainly validating, but in the interest of program and growth, we focused our time and energy digging into the findings related to areas for improvement. The next several slides highlight many of the audit findings for growth and improvement. We have organized them around our strategic plan core values and priorities. The first set of findings are correlated to our core values of belonging and equity. The team from MSA noted that families report difficulty understanding Magnet options, and there's a desire for communications to be in multiple languages. Parent organizations supporting our Magnet programs are not necessarily representative of our various student groups. Stakeholders desire more formal and accessible pathways to provide program input and feedback. And our climate survey data noted school safety, physical environment, and bullying remain areas for improvement within our programs. Finally, Magnet programs need to take more intentional action to recruit a more diverse group of teachers and students. These findings reinforce our need to better leverage the strategic plan's core values of belonging and equity as a unifying lens for inclusive communication, accessible programming, safe environments, and partnerships that reflect our community's diversity. With respect to priority 1, achieving academic excellence, the audit findings indicate that achievement gaps persist between and among key demographic groups. There is variability in instructional rigor and evidence of the Magnet theme approach across classrooms. Our system lacks some vertically aligned theme-based cornerstone experiences across grades K to 12. The found evidence of inconsistent intervention structures as well as tiered supports for students when they demonstrate difficulty. Finally, teacher turnover at some of our Magnet schools disrupts instructional quality in several programs. These Magnet-specific gaps mirror some of the same challenges we see district-wide with respect to alignment, rigor, and intervention systems that must be strengthened. Magnet system improvements are foundational to AACPS's goal of preparing students for post-secondary success and growing college and career pipelines. Findings suggest that the long-range student program membership is impacted by a lack of true K-12 Magnet and CTE pathways. The high demand for CTE, CAT Center, and STEM program seats far exceeds our capacity, and we have large annual wait lists. AACPS needs more career-connected learning opportunities for students. We lack some long-range planning tools to help students chart their college and career readiness journey. Some prerequisites and application criteria can limit access to Magnet and CTE participation. And finally, we lack some of the skilled staff needed to teach new and emerging technologies. The Magnet Review identifies professional learning, leadership development, and teacher recruitment as critical leverage points for improving program fidelity and retention. The findings specifically note that PD for Magnet teachers has been inconsistent, it's often not theme aligned, and it's inconsistently attended by school leaders. In general, some of our Magnet program principals lack training on running a theme-based school. The visit team expressed a desire for stronger teacher pipelines, especially for bilingual and CTE specialty areas. They noted insufficient collaboration between district staff and Magnet programs. And they found we need to better support magnet teachers that are the only staff assigned to a given content within a school. Our teachers are the most important resource in the magnet and CTE classroom. We must meet our obligation to properly prepare our students for college and career pathways, and investing in our teachers will provide a significant return expressed by student outcomes. The audit identified gaps between existing equipment, classroom spaces, and program access points, and our strategic plan values and priorities. Specifically, the current lottery system lacks diversity supports, leading to some inequitable admissions processes. Transportation creates inequities in both access and participation, particularly for our CAT programs and Apex Art and BEMA Magnet programs. Decentralized communication structures result in some outdated school websites and incomplete or inaccurate program information. Program marketing has been noted as being inconsistent and largely school-driven, with no district owner. Significant equipment, space, and facility needs have emerged at CAT North and South and at some magnet locations. To support equity and transparency, AACPS magnet programs need system-wide operational structures for logistics, communication, admissions, and resource planning. To meet that challenge, our system has recently established a cross-functional implementation team to support just this type of improvement initiative. Magnet Schools of America provided 65 detailed recommendations. The CCR team has spent countless hours analyzing, collating, and synthesizing the various findings and recommendations, and have identified some short and long-term strategic actions. The next several slides organize the many individual findings and recommendations into 7 categories of key findings. For each key finding category, I will share some of the actions that have taken place in the 11 months since this audit was conducted. Key recommendation 1 is for AACPS to develop a district-wide vision and framework for magnet and CTE programming. Based on the MSA recommendations noted in the left column here, we have already moved within the division of CCR to modernize the Program Advisory Committee structure at both CAT North and South to promote equity of voice between our students, teachers, and business partners. We have developed both magnet and CTE 5-year plans for program improvement. And we have established a consistent magnet program advisory structure to provide recommendations to both program and school leadership. And finally, we've established a CCR department structure to consolidate and coordinate communication across the district. Key recommendation 2 is for AACPS to reimagine the application and lottery process to ensure equitable access for all students. Over the last 9 months, my team has partnered with both the Offices of Equity and Legislative Policy to examine our magnet regulation and lottery structure. We've established a work group to review the AACPS magnet application criteria and provide recommendations for improvement. And finally, we have worked with the Student Data Office to establish a transparent lottery process embedded in our current student information system. Key recommendation 3 is for AACPS to build K-12 pathways for IB, STEM, Apex Arts, and CTE programming. While I agree with many of the recommendations, implementing some of them will create a dramatically different structure in AACPS than what we're used to. For example, I'm not sure that we want to create elementary magnet schools in our district. However, in response to the growing and unprecedented interest in STEM, we have transitioned Triple E from 4 different themes to 1 STEM and society theme in grades pre-K to 5 to provide equity of access for all students. We've examined the impacts of and recommended changes to program, magnet, and CTE feeder patterns as necessitated by redistricting phase 2. We've established work groups to look at AACPS magnet application and lottery protocols and provide recommendations. And finally, we've created a career pathways course for all middle school students to address COMAR requirements and provide exposure to all 14 CTE career clusters. Key recommendation 4 is for AACPS to expand transportation and program capacity to increase student access and representation. Based on the MSA recommendations noted in the left column, we have already moved within the division of CCR to actively review student application and waitlist data to identify schools that could host CTE programs previously only accessible at CAT South and CAT North. Mr. Rose and Ms. Keller have held meetings with school-based teams to roll out new MSDE pathway requirements, which will lead to a doubling of the available capacity at both CAT North and CAT South. And we've considered options for student self-transportation to allow participation in career institutes within networks. Key recommendation 5 is for AACPS to create magnet or program-specific professional development and leadership pipelines. Over the last 9 months, my team has partnered with MSA and the National Institute for Magnet School Leadership to provide targeted professional learning and coaching for both principals and our school-based program leaders. We've worked with national organizations that authorize our teachers and curriculum, such as IB, AVID, and Project Lead the Way, to coordinate training locally to increase both utilization and to control for travel costs. We have almost concluded year 2 of the CTE Leadership Academy, a pipeline program to develop future school-based leaders currently teaching in our CTE classrooms. Key recommendation 6 is for AACPS to launch district-managed marketing and communication systems. This is an area I'm happy to share where we have done a significant amount of work before the Magnet Schools of America audit even took place. Specifically, we have launched the Pathways to Possibilities marketing campaign to include our website, program literature, and training for school counselors and principals. You have samples to examine in front of you, and you may also use the QR code on the slide to visit our website for more information about our programs. My team has attended all of the high school scheduling nights over the last month to share CCR program criteria and opportunities with our families. Finally, key recommendation 7 is for AACPS to implement a magnet continuous improvement cycle tied to school improvement plans. This finding touches on some longstanding structural and philosophical conflicts between both magnet school programs, the accountability structures at our district level, and several central office teams. To address some of these challenges in the division of CCR, all programs in the CCR division have established program development plans that are tied directly to student achievement outcomes that also align with our school's school improvement goals. We've established, as I mentioned before, a CCR department structure to consolidate and coordinate communication and training across the district. And finally, we've designed and implemented CCR-specific data dashboards within Power School Student Information System and Analysis and Insights platform. Due to many factors, including budgets, feasibility, system readiness, many of the strategic actions in response to MSA's audit will have to take place and be spread out over a series of years. In the slides that follow, I will preview some of the ideas proposed in the 5-year plans for both Magnet and CTE programs. Now, these plans will need to undergo the full vetting of our cross-functional team that I mentioned earlier, as well as the cabinet and Dr. Bedell before being initiated. First and foremost, the CTE 5-year plan lays out the action steps needed to fully implement the new MSDE career clusters and program pathways. As you can see in the schematic, all CTE pathways consist of a 3 or 4 credit program with students sitting for an appropriate industry-related credential exam by the end of course 2. For all students, we plan to offer these assessments at the conclusion of every basic technology course, with the goal of exceeding Blueprint's mandate that 45% of all graduates earn a credential or complete an apprenticeship by 2031. We also plan to increase significantly from the current slate of 40 in-house AACPS-funded apprenticeships throughout the district. These opportunities currently exist within the Division of Facilities, Operations, Legal, and Legislative Policy. And as we prepare to open the new Center of Applied Technology North in 2027, we are simultaneously establishing foundational CTE programming and career institutes in every network. To ensure that we are providing equity of access to all programs for all students in AACPS, we plan to ensure that all comprehensive high schools offer the following pathways: computer programming, culinary arts, early childhood education, engineering through Project Lead the Way, graphic communication, management and entrepreneurship, marketing services, and video and audio production. To capitalize on existing signature and magnet themes and to provide access to programs that have not been able to run at every school historically, We plan to establish career institutes so that these pathways can be offered in every network. Aeronautics, aviation, and aerospace, agricultural services, architecture, design, and drafting, biomedical sciences, cybersecurity, emergency response training, financial services, hotel and restaurant management, and JROTC. This is an example of how the Agricultural Sciences Career Institute will leverage some of the related programming that already exists within AACPS and provide access with minimal new investment in facilities and equipment. You may not be aware of what schools are currently offering this type of programming, but at Arlington Echo, we have a robust outdoor education curriculum. At Cat North, the Phoenix Center, and at Southern High School, we have the curriculum for agricultural science education. All of our comprehensive high schools have access to a co-curricular experience known as Envirothon. At Broadneck High School, we have a signature pathway, and the theme is environmental resource management. And at both North County and South River in our STEM programs, we have green tech pathways. So there's currently a lot of this work taking place. But a career institute in agricultural science at Southern High School, for example, could allow students in that network, Network 3, to maintain their current school affiliation and travel to take classes in ag science at Southern in a manner similar to JROTC or the Centers of Applied Technology. By spreading our portfolio of programs across schools in this way, we can ensure that programs persist and even grow in spite of staffing or scheduling challenges. We can consolidate resources, equipment, and training efforts, and this is a win-win. This slide highlights some key short and long-term goals for CTE that we'd like to highlight. Our short-term goals for CTE include implementing a core flex model, that was the schematic you saw 3 slides ago, to include dual enrollment, career-connected learning, and that covers all manners of work-based learning, including apprenticeships and internships, and or the CTE capstone course, which will be offered to all of our students. Establish foundational CTE programs and pathways at all of our comprehensive high schools. Our long-term goals include the establishment of those career institutes in each network and allowing students to self-transport initially. And finally, we plan to continue to research and evaluate new MSDE-approved programs that are not currently offered within AACPS, as well as opportunities to expand existing programs to better meet evolving student needs. Moving on to our Magnet 5-year plan, the team has been able to leverage these audit findings and identify solutions to challenges standing in the way of effective program implementation. Given our current budget outlook, the team has been charged with looking inward to consolidate, enhance, and collaborate on the path to program improvement. One of the unique ideas from the Magnet team is to create something called Idea Hubs. It's an acronym for Innovation, Design, Entrepreneurism, and Artful Thinking. Idea Hubs are an innovative strategy leveraging shared regional locations for Magnet students to access advanced resources during and beyond the school day. These are unique spaces to serve as design or project or competition and performance spaces with specialized equipment and appropriate storage. Flexible classrooms, spaces with garage doors that can expand from serving 30 students to a capacity of 60 or 90 students. They can host student-run entrepreneurial ventures. Some of those are revenue generating, some of those are revenue saving. For example, musical instrument repair as a service. We could work on repairing AACPS-owned instruments. That would be cost saving. And our students could open up an instrument repair shop, and that would be revenue generating. We've discussed quite a bit about what a ghost kitchen is, but we could establish some ghost kitchens to support restaurants in our community, but also to serve as training grounds for our culinary students at Cat North and Cat South and at our high schools. And the work that they do to either sell food on behalf of a restaurant or on behalf of the ACPS could be a cost-generating structure as well. Another innovation proposed by our Magnet team is that called Apex 1. The reported success of Cat North and Studio 39 in this audit reinforces that focused, immersive learning environments successfully facilitate academic success and promote greater fidelity to programmatic outcomes. The Apex 1 proposal seeks to combine multiple grade levels into one location with the goals of providing focused resources and instruction and to facilitate collaboration among students and staff. Reorienting our programming in this space will allow Apex Arts to scale back some activities outside of the school day, leverage existing co-curricular activities, strengthen our middle to high school alignment and pathways, and finally modernize our offerings and will allow us to reduce some under-enrolled primes. This slide highlights some key short and long-term goals related to the 5-year plan for magnet improvement. In the short term, we want to follow the MSA's recommendations to develop and publish magnet implementation frameworks across our district to include an updated application and lottery process, integrated professional learning for our teachers and school leaders, and develop a system, district-wide communication plan to keep our stakeholders informed. And finally, our long-term goals are to seek, at some point, approval for modification of program and site affiliations in order to create that K-12 pathway they've talked about so many times, to perhaps right-size some programs based on long-term trend data in terms of how many people are enrolled and how many people are completing, and establish new transportation and routing to support both our networked magnet sites and our career institutes. And finally, to realize the implementation of our Apex One concept and idea hubs. I just want to say thank you all for providing for me this forum to share the work underway in the Division of College and Career Readiness. At this time, I happily will answer any of your questions.
All right, thank you all very much. So we're going to go in roll call order. Unless I see lights. I don't see any lights. Yeah, so we're going to start off with Mr. Silkworth.
So I would like to thank you so much for this great presentation. There's an awful lot here to digest. There's a lot. And so I'm not going to try to digest everything at this time. I took some notes. I am going to make a few comments. We talked about awards across the district. They were across the district, which is phenomenal. Then there were some concerns about some coursework barriers that block access to magnet participation. I have to say that for me, I've been concerned for a long time about any barriers that are keeping our students from participating. And I know we have this lottery process, and unfortunately, there are winners, there are losers. And I know when I've gone to different schools or the VOTEC centers, I've thought, what great programs. But in terms of, we have almost 85,000 students, but how many of those students have been able to access these programs? So you mentioned a couple other things, some of the skilled staff needed to teach new and emerging technologies. The reimagining the application and lotterying process, I think that's a very critical thing to be able to do that. But I also think, I wish to goodness that we didn't have a lottery system. I wish to goodness that we could put all of these programs in front of all of our students and let them, based upon their interest, make a decision as to what they want. But we're not there. So having said that, I am wondering, having taught for a long time, those things are different today than they were when I was in the classroom. Are we doing our very best to promote all of these programs across the school system? And I was very much intrigued by the idea hubs. I would like to know more about idea hubs, because you know what? Students do extremely well when they're actively involved in what's going on. And so at some point in time, I'd like to hear some more about that. So I may have a few other questions, but once again, thank you, Dr. Bedell, and thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Silkworth. Ms. Shawhine.
Yes, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time, particularly during redistricting. But here we are. So I have lots of questions. So I'm going to start. First, I'm going to say thank you. Thank you for all of this. I wouldn't have wanted to go through 600 pages, so synthesizing it down is great. All right. page 9, slide 17, just for starters. I've heard repeatedly over years that for some of our current magnets on the application, there is a world language requirement. And that world language requirement sometimes is very specific. And sometimes that world language requirement actually stands as a barrier for access. Say a student is coming in from a school system outside of AACPS and wants to apply, or even a private school that offers a language that we don't, and they've availed themselves of that opportunity, and then they get to applying for a spot in a magnet, and their language isn't listed there, and they're automatically rejected, even though they meet all the other requirements. And so I hope that we look at that specifically, because I think it is a barrier. I don't understand why you wouldn't want any. We don't require our middle school kids to take a world language, so that's one thing.
Correct.
But even if we did, some schools offer some languages that others don't. And say the requirement says that currently for STEM, for example, that you must have taken 2 years of Spanish, but you took Chinese. Where does that leave you? It leaves you with no opportunity currently. So like, I really would like that looked at specifically, hopefully sooner than later. That's a change you can make as early as next year's academic year for entry the following
Yes, ma'am.
year after that. I was intrigued by, on page 10, well, not intrigued, not surprised, that transportation creates inequities. And so then when later you talked about some kids having to self-transport for certain things, wouldn't that in fact be an inequity?
It certainly could become, because only students have access to transportation can participate.
Right.
We have a kind of a precedent with our JROTC program. When transportation was unable to be provided or unable to be funded, we allowed students to self-transport in the initial years until we could build it was clear data that there was a compelling need to invest in buses. And now
I remember
transport
that
those
fight.
students. We transport
And now
those
we
students all over
transport
the district. Yes,
Mhm.
ma'am. So that's kind of what we're facing now is transportation challenges, but
Yeah,
opening the
creates a
door.
barrier to access. Yeah.
No, and I was just going to add, it's more of a long-term, what can we do in the immediate, as opposed to doing nothing if kids want access to certain programming.
And I agree with that, surely, but I just hope it doesn't blow up in our faces when we say, great, we're gonna start here, but you only can self-transport for folks that don't have access to private transportation. I think there's gonna be a backlash there. So just some thoughts about that. Let's see, I just have a little bit more and then I'll, oh yes, this is fabulous. Thank you. This is lovely. Is this available in multiple languages?
On our website, yes, ma'am, it can be toggled to be translated in other languages on the web.
But the printed version's only in English?
I have to double check, but all I have available to me right now is English to provide to you.
I think at first, for just basic, we should have this available in English and Spanish for equity purposes. And I know our fabulous team can do that in their sleep. Oh, I had a question about STEM and society, and then I know I'm doing a lot, but do you want me to quit after this one? Awesome sauce. All right, STEM and society. So going from 4 themes to 1 theme, I get it. Is that STEM or STEAM? And then what is the society theme?
Go ahead.
Okay, it's STEM, not STEAM.
Okay.
And
No
it's
worry.
more just the society piece is just more looking at it from a community standpoint. So think about it, not STEM in isolation, but STEM in community because it's it's elementary.
Okay. I mean, I definitely have more. Do you want to go on and let someone else talk? Okay, great. I'll definitely be back for the second go.
Thank you. So I really love the emphasis on building the K to 12 pathways. For our middle school, the career pathway course for middle school students, can you kind of go over just a summary sort of what that looks like?
Yes. And then I'll let Dr. Hamlin jump in if I miss anything now.
Um,
I think of it as a pre-CTE, let's expose you to all of the 14 pathways course so that you have exposure before you enter high school. It aligns to that idea of 6-year planning. So instead of getting into high school and saying, oh, maybe I want to enter a CTE pathway, but I don't even know what CTE pathways exist or what's available to me when I'm in middle school, I can take a course that actually exposes me to all of them. Want to add anything?
It's very much like our
Okay.
Career X courses in the signature area or the Career Explorations course at CAT. It just gives a sampling of all of the different career pathways. So hopefully piques student interest, and in combination with the work of our career coaches and our CTE teachers, helping set those students up for a pathway selection heading into high school.
That is excellent. Thank you so much. That's all I have.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Again, like Mr. Worth has a lot to digest. I wanted to say I do love these as well, not just because my face is on the Glen Burnie Public Service one,
That was
I
coincidental,
did
by the
not
way.
know that.
but because I saw them at Glen Burnie at my home school recently, and I even took a couple, and there were some in Spanish, which was really cool to see for not only the programs at our school, but other programs across, which is awesome. You know, I always say the biggest barriers to getting involved is communication and then transportation. So I love everything on here. You know, allowing students to transport, because students may be able to hear about it. But, you know, even those that can't transport, you know, it's awesome to see that, you know, allowing some that can, the access is awesome. And so I really do love the, you know, communication piece, especially. I didn't know what Magnet was until probably halfway through my freshman year. I know many other students who, you know, are in that same boat. And so maybe if you could speak a little to like kind of what's going, like what you guys are doing with the communication to make sure families know and we can improve. I love seeing the district-wide thing as well. The district-wide piece, I love district-wide communication, anything. And so it's awesome to see we're doing that for Magnet. But is there any like specific, you know, action items for, you know, communication to families?
Absolutely. So just to kind of look at it from the long range perspective, I mentioned the fact that all of our elementary students are going to be able to take STEM. So that gives us a little bit of an opportunity to kind of prepare their minds for what lies ahead for them in middle school. So we'll be able to provide that education for our youngest learners in grades pre-K to 5. We planned this year, we went to all of the high school scheduling nights. Many of our comprehensive middle and high schools are also now hosting CCR nights to really unlock what does it mean to become college and career ready and what opportunities exist for students beyond that. The marketing materials is a step in the right direction, but you know, someone has to have that put in their hand or come across the stand. So we're really open to any other opportunities. I'm presenting next week to our International Parent and Family program. We go and provide stand-up informational sessions to classrooms or for community schools. So we really are trying to get the word out, but we're always open to new channels of communication to our families and to our students. That's the only way we're going to improve both our recruitment numbers and our long-range retention. So that's just some of what we're doing. I mean, we've sent postcards to every 5th and 8th grade student in the weeks leading up to the application portal being turned on. I feel like we do a great job of shepherding and supporting families through that application process, because it's easy to lose, the context of what it's like to be a parent, perhaps not affiliated, understanding all the intricacies of our education system, right? So we have visuals, we have videos, how-tos, and we have some drop-in sessions for our families as well. So we're trying to attack the communication issue from every angle we can.
Thank you. That's great news. I like to hear that. And so again, like Mr. Zuckworth said, I was going to ask about IDEA, and I, would love to hear more. That's IDEA Hub sounds like a great idea. And so, I saw student led and I saw student run and got so excited. And I've been to our CAT South or our CAT North, sorry, where the culinary, fed me, and, I was able to purchase, their food. So it's awesome to see more of that. And so I'd love to hear more when we can. So thank you guys.
Absolutely.
So good.
We have I bought a wreath from Cat North. I mean, they have all kinds of things going out the doors from their programs. Just to give you a little bit more context about Idea Hubs, our magnet leaders are never at a loss for ways to innovate and be kind of on the leading edge. And if you think about some of the spaces that are being created on our higher ed four-year campuses, like at Maryland, it's more of like an innovation lab. I'm a student. I've got an idea for a research initiative. I can go do some self-directed research, or think about like a large maker space, 3D printers, tools, small tools to build conceptual designs. So that's really what we're looking to capture in that kind of the spirit of the Idea Hubs. Initially, we'd like to focus on buildings and spaces that we already kind of control. So thinking about places like Studio 39 or our CAT centers. Long range, it would be great if you've been to the Annapolis Mall to see some of the mixed public, private, opportunities that happen there. We'd love to get to that point at some point in the future. It's expensive square footage.
That's it? All right. Ms. Foley?
Okay, I, as my colleague, Ms. Schellheim, have a few comments, but I will try to, I'll break them up and separate them out. Pulling on the thread of Mr. Silkworth, when he talked about the winners and losers and some of our programs, I will tell you South River and their STEM program definitely has a long waiting list, and not sure how we can break that up. But that's definitely an area that when I hear from parents, it's how can you get me in? I was in the program in the middle school, and now I can't get into the high school. And so that's something that we want to keep them engaged, especially if they're in the Southern cluster, and then they go to get into the South River cluster, the South River STEM program. So I definitely, that's something that is important to me. The promoting piece, I think that is very important, because sometimes I hear from Mr. Rose that we only have a certain number of students in various programs. But I think as time goes on, there's different ways to emphasize and market these programs. And I always go back to the, what's it called? The gaming program, because that gaming program is, and I hear parents say it all the time. They say, well, that's not what I want my child to do. There's not money in that. And I'm like, well, yeah, there kind of is. And it's big in defense, and it's big here, and it's big there. So the marketing piece and promoting piece, maybe having more people from externally help with that. And even with our logistics program, logistics is everywhere. And so I think there's a way to bring in our external stakeholders to help with that marketing piece. The Idea Hubs, I love it. We have one at the University of Maryland, just one. But I definitely am interested in hearing more about that. The self-transport, I thank you for that, because it really is, although I do see that there could be inequities, but at least it opens up the opportunity. And I thank you for that, because while we're seeing the interest in massaging things, it's like, let's just open it up and see if we can get parents there. The middle school plan is awesome. And I thank you, Ms. McFarland, for asking that question, because I see that as a way. Many parents, and I go back to agriculture, they really don't know what that is, or what some of these CTE pathways are. So giving them that opportunity to taste it in the middle school, or maybe taste isn't, or to try it, is going to be a game changer. And I think it also complements what we're doing with lowering the credits, right? Is that kind of like, that's going to help us keep our students in school longer. And I love that now all elementary schools will be taking STEM classes. That to me That's really, really important because there's some programs, especially in the Southern Cluster, they don't always get to see the light of day. So I thank you for that. And so I have another comment, but I'm going to go ahead and transfer that over. All right, Dr. Tobey.
Thank you. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. So I have a couple of questions. I'll start with a couple of things that are specific to some concerns in the Annapolis cluster. I'm very glad to see the discussion of the K through 12 pathway, because one of the big issues in Annapolis, obviously, as we saw, Annapolis High has a lot, I think the most magnets of any of our comprehensive high schools. There has been concern for a long time that the IB program is not as diverse as it should in any way be, to be reflective of the population of the school. And it, you know, with regard to the K through 12 pathway, it's easy with IB in that there is IBYP, right? And I mean, PYMP or whatever it's called, and MYP. And so I'm hopeful that if we follow some of these recommendations, there will be an opportunity to consider putting the primary years program into more of our elementary schools, particularly the ones that feed into Annapolis Middle, which has the middle years program, with the hope being that students who are exposed from an early age to IB will be a natural progression to go into the high school magnet program, not a sense that this is sort of a strange new thing. And I say this as the parent of an IB program. It's fabulous. And, you know, Dr. Bedell knows we've talked about this. I happen to think it's probably the best preparation for a lot of things, college and otherwise, that I can think of. But also, as I'm sure you both know, IB was built to be accessible to everyone. It was not built to be an elite program. So I'm very happy to see that, and I'm hopeful that is something that might be on the horizon, because there's already a mechanism in place. Am I correct about that, or are there more complications than I'm aware of?
So I think, and sort of dovetailing off of, and that's why I advanced to the slide,
Yeah.
dovetailing a little bit off of some of the comments that Ms. Pulliam made. It was a lot to digest.
Yeah.
All of the recommendations, and in trying to lay them out over a long-term linear plan. We also have to think about, and I'm thinking about my colleague that you all know and love, Mr. Stansky, who's been in this seat often and a lot lately, layering those recommendations against our fiscal realities.
Yeah.
And so when we think about some of the things that you're mentioning, which is really this idea of program and site affiliation for vertical alignment,
Right.
is what you're talking about,
Right.
which came up in the audit a lot, and we mentioned it in some of the recommendations. And what Ms. Pulliam was talking about in really, the wait lists that was mentioned as well, that's just, we know what our long-term trend data looks like. They pointed it out, but they didn't have to point it out to us.
Right.
We know where our wait lists are. We know where the demand for certain seats are. Ms. Schellheim talked about transportation and transportation being a barrier, and you see that under our long-term goals.
Right.
So to answer your question, are we thinking about it? Yes, because vertical alignment came up in relationship to site affiliations.
Right.
And so, yes, these are goals of ours. I just think that we look at them as goals in relationship to what we know very well as a fiscal reality.
Right.
And so they are right now on the long-term list.
Right. Yeah, and I appreciate that. I know IB is expensive in lots of ways. I would only suggest that, as you know, I think we all know, you're going to kill a lot of birds with this stone. that are things we're very concerned about, closing achievement gaps, building diversity in, our program. I mean, this is something. And so as we think about those costs, which are real, they do a lot more than just meet the requirements of this particular audit. So that which I know I'm simply sort of reiterating that as we look at this downstream. And this is also one of my favorite hobby horses, as you know. But the fact of the matter is, something like IB, which is an internationally based system, I think has huge import for setting up our students to compete. And this brings me to another question I have, which is around the focus on STEM, which is great, but I am curious about how flexible we are with content. In other words, what is a particular STEM subject content area right now can change really fast, right? So if kids go deep into a certain kind of technical material, by the time they even get out of high school, if they're looking at it in middle school or even being introduced to certain things in elementary, things can change. Now, we don't have a perfect crystal ball. Nobody does. But I think what we do know is we've got to be as nimble as possible. And so I wonder if that's in any of the conversations that you're having about this.
Yeah, I think when you talk about STEM in particular, I think Dr. McMahon would tell you that it's less of an emphasis on whatever the pathway is, nanotechnology or computer science, and it's more about making these students critical thinkers, kind of leaning into their creativity, but also teaching them to be good project managers.
Yep.
The skills that are applicable no matter how the technology shifts.
Right.
And that's really, you see that in their approach to, integrated science classes with applications for both physics and biology and chemistry, but then also taking it from the theoretical to the practical with their capstone projects. I think it's a model. The program is a good model, and the content could come in or out over time as dictated by our partners at higher ed or industry are telling us they need.
And this is partly messaging too, because I do find a lot of parents still that I speak with, what they think their kids are going to get out of it is they're going to be trained to do X, and they're going to be able to go get a great job as, heaven forbid you're a computer science major this year who's graduating, right? You can't find a job. So, it's also having those conversations, which I appreciate, Dr. Hamlin, that you and your staff are doing with these evenings that you attend and so on, because I think I don't think it's hard for the students to understand. I think it's sometimes hard for the families to understand. And some of us may have seen in the news, one of the big AI companies, Anthropic, the woman who is the CEO was a literature major in college and swears up and down that actually what everybody needs to study is the humanities. Because that is what's needed to handle a world in which AI is increasingly an element of some kind. Nobody quite knows what. So I just throw that out there. The other thing I wanted to ask about is, can you explain a little more what we're talking about in APEX 1? Are we talking about an actual school? Or what is it that we're thinking about?
Yeah, I was purposefully just a little vague.
I wondered.
I think there's a continuum of what we would like to see and maybe what's more practical. So if we're talking about what I want for Christmas,
Right.
it would be, a comprehensive 6 to 12,
Sure.
program where the students are there to pursue their art interests and music interests, but also to receive the comprehensive curriculum. What might be more practical is looking at, a currently existing space like Studio 39 and thinking about how we could bring students in grades 10 to 12 to that space to finish out their high school career if that's what they'd like to do. We have that building already. It's very beautifully appointed, and Mr. Kaufman has done an incredible job with his team of making it a world-class space. So could we bring students there to engage in more arts-centric activities in the 10th to 12th grade, and then, meet some of their academic needs through courses at the community college or through some virtual learning options, or bringing some teachers of core content to that space.
Got it.
But that would be kind of the concept. I don't know that we have a physical space, that could lend itself to a 6 to 12 at this point, but
It's a
we-
bridge in a
yes, ma'am.
sense. And okay, well, I appreciate that, because as I've said, I feel ultimately we need to be aiming at that, but how realistic it is in the short term, we all know is, and we don't want to give Mr. Stansky more heartburn than I'm sure he.
No, so we're prepared to answer questions for Mr. Stansky. 39 would be ideal because we talked about some of the transportation concerns for Apex in particular.
Yeah.
If you're a student living in the Severn area or the Chesapeake Peninsula, that's one, you got to get to Annapolis or to Broadneck.
Yeah.
So, but between Annapolis and Broadneck is Studio 39.
Yeah.
We're already bringing students to those schools. Getting them to 39 shouldn't be a big lift. It might
difficult.
actually reduce some of the shuttle bus costs long term. But
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of back and forth, and I've always credited both the comprehensive principals and the Apex program for trying to fit it into the comprehensive schedule, but it's not easy. So one last thing. I'm very, very pleased to hear the thoughts about the lottery process, because that's always been tricky. You talk about at one point a more transparent lottery. What do we have a sense of what potential mechanisms are to be helpful with that?
So currently we use a third party to do the randomized draw
Right.
for us. And then that person provides us with extensive lists in a magnet ID based on the
Mhm.
student's application. And we currently offer seats for the next school year, generally right around now. And we post the wait lists in order on the website so
Right.
parents can track how
Right.
people are coming and going. When we talk about greater transparency in the lottery process, I think what they're calling out is we have this very randomized lottery with very little criteria in terms of weighting
Yeah.
for any particular student group. We do have minimal GPA requirements. We do have some world language requirements currently that could be a barrier. So I think we're going to look at all of those
Yeah.
things. And I think it's very important for us to capture not just, the magnet office voice, but our school leaders, our parents, our students, and really some of our partners in lots of other offices, because I know that we have conversations every spring with about how we can recruit more English language learners, how we could better support students with disabilities in these programs. So, absolutely. Some of the recommendations from Magnet Schools of America, because in some areas of the country, these are hotly, contested seats, not just for the families and the student participants, but for the schools so that they can, secure funding and all of that. So they have lots of incentives in some of those areas. If you're a sibling of someone who got, a seat in a magnet program, to be more, empathetic to mom and dad's travel.
Right.
We bring the sibling in with you into STEM.
Right.
We talked about, maybe you win the lottery in 6th grade and you get to join STEM. Should there be some waiting for you to bridge 8th into 9th grade and continue that trajectory? Those are all good questions. They're not currently the way we operate, but I think
Right.
it's time to examine, some changes based on research and based on what this organization is telling us and what we've heard from some of our families.
And I do want to second what Ms. Schalheim was saying, because I've heard similar things from parents about the world language issue, that it seems unnecessarily difficult to sort of get over that hump in something that is not dependent on that particular set of classes. So, all right. Well, thank you very much. This was, I too was waiting to see this. I appreciate your sharing all the various findings about our strengths and our challenges. And I may have another question depending on what else is said. Thank you.
Ms. McDermott.
Thank you. Just two questions from me. I'm looking at slide 17. Yes. Specifically curious about the lack of skilled staff needed and which areas those are. What is the impact on the programs if you don't have those skilled staff? And then if I've missed this, I apologize, but what is the plan to recruit those staff members in the future?
So I'd say the most glaring challenge we face annually is, all due respect to, like, what do you do if you're a computer science major graduating this year? Please come work for us.
Right.
Yes, because there are
We'll take you.
yeah, there are challenges with recruiting and retaining teachers with that skill set, because we live in an area where there are lots of opportunities for them
Yes.
to earn significantly more compensation. But computer science in general is a struggle for us. But then when you think about emerging technologies, you mentioned AI. I went to a meeting last week where they're talking about quantum computing. I know we're a ways away from anything like that, but I also went to a ribbon in the comprehensive high school setting, perhaps. But also at the community college, they just they did a ribbon cutting for a cyber range. So you start thinking about what it's going to take to provide students the place and space to experiment with technology, but also maintain the security of our network and data. Those are some areas that we're still just trying to find our way. And certainly our partnerships with higher ed are going to help inform, where we can go. And it's really great that we have this partnership with the community college. We're sending thousands of students there, and I think we have the opportunity to kind of lengthen our runway for kids. We can start getting them excited about computer technology, but then they also have some opportunities to receive certification and credentials long range in some of those programs.
Okay. And then, I've heard the community college and higher education period as being stakeholders in this. We are in, the mecca of computers being in this area, right? So are there other organizations we're reaching out to, trying to form partnerships with? There's a lot of contracting companies out there that I think could be beneficial. Have we talked about that at all?
Absolutely. I think there's definitely a lot more work we can do. We have lots of partners at the school level, because, they're a business in the South River area. They feel compelled, to go support the South River students. They show up to be coaches for community challenge projects, or they're mentors for capstone projects. Mr. Rose and I have we both attend two different partnership groups. I am a board member of the Fort Meade Alliance.
Very good.
So we get to really tap into some of the expertise in both the defense and technical corridors through that. They're going to be helping us write our financial literacy course and curriculum. But they also have come out to support us at not job shadowing, mock interviews at all of our high schools. And then Mr. Rose sits on the BWI partnership. So that was one of the meetings that I just mentioned, where we got to see Congresswoman Elfreth and the CEO of Northrop Grumman talk about quantum computing, and then I kind of Googled more about it. But there are lots. We are surrounded by a great number of partners, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our partners at Workforce Development. They can keep us plugged into bringing the workforce into the classroom. So that's a great opportunity to partner as well.
Any other areas besides computer science that we're looking at?
I mentioned nanotechnology. That's something that's been on the one of the pathways for a while. And materials science. Those are some areas where you might have an expert one year, but he or she may be called to do something else, or might just retire. So those gaps are hard to fill. I think we could probably find people in some of these key spaces, but not with the immediacy that we need to get them in front of kids the next day.
Okay. Thank you. And then the other question I had is a real easy one, and I'm just looking for an overview because it piqued my interest for the Financial Services Career Institute, what that looks like.
So these career institutes are really aligned to MSDE pathways. Financial services is a combination of accounting and finance, if you will.
Yep.
There are usually we have 2 entry-level classes, like accounting 1 or accounting 2.
Very good.
But then students can take classes if there's an accounting 3, or if there's a dual credit class available to them in accounting at the community college, or they could go do some career connected learning, perhaps with a tax company. So we try to provide students with options when they get there, but that in general is the pathway for financial services.
Okay, because I'm wondering if we can have some, built-in credit equivalencies for tax prep or CPAs, have some kids coming out and ready to go. Okay, thank
Absolutely.
you.
Mr. Silkworth, any more questions?
I don't know that I have any additional questions. Just a comment or two. I did hear you talk about a middle school exploratory course.
Yes, sir.
So I do have a question. Is that going to be mandatory?
It is going to meet a COMA requirement for computational learning, which is really, when you think about it, it's the design process, the design thinking process. But it is not the sole course that can help meet that criteria for the state. Basically, the majority of our technology education and computer science courses and our IB design courses at the middle school level will also meet that requirement. But we felt like this was an opportunity to create a course to both meet the computational thinking requirement, but then also to use it as a, not so much marketing, but opportunity vehicle for our students to understand what awaits them.
I mean, I completely agree that those kind, I'm glad to hear there are other courses, because that's going to help our students. That's going to absolutely help them in terms of making choices. Students need to know at the middle school what is available to them at the high school.
Yes,
So I don't know. I tend to look at things in a more of a simplistic way. So I hear that we have barriers. And we've identified some. So we need to identify the barriers. And then we need to seek solutions. And I know with your great leadership that we're doing that. As we're seeking those solutions, if the solutions impacts a budget, then we need to know. If they don't, then we need to come up with strategies that can be implemented to help find students for our great students. So that they can belong, grow, and succeed. Final comment is, boy, I went to school in Anne Arundel County, and nanotechnology.
I'd look that one up too.
However, having said that, we also, during my time, landed on the moon. And I think we're going to go back. So there was a lot of great things happening during my time also.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Once again, thank you so much.
Okay. Mr. Silkworth took part of my thunder with regard to the Pathways course. So I'm glad to hear that it will fulfill the computational learning requirement I'm hearing so much about in my emails these days. And I look forward to hearing more from you when you have answers about what that will look like, because I'm getting hammered by constituents about what this means for them and their children. I digress. Going back to Triple E and STEM, like, I get it, but what are we losing by getting rid of the other themes, like the arts and humanities, the global cultures and world? I think we're losing something. I think we're losing a lot.
No doubt. I mean, we're divesting from the the arts integration pathways, but students still get to avail themselves of arts experiences at the elementary school, both fine arts and music.
So
Sorry.
I want to say, like, there was a crosswalk done though. So in the sense that students were able to get art, like students were still getting art in art. Students were still getting in social studies, we're still getting standards that were, so there was a crosswalk done to make sure that students weren't losing some of those opportunities and that they were getting them in other courses. It was more that in terms of STEM, and the trajectory for STEM, that they didn't have opportunities for a lot of STEM through just the science time that they had in science class. So I just wanted to,
Okay, that's
because
fair.
I didn't want to not talk about the work that was done
No,
with the
that's great.
crosswalk that was done
I'm glad it
before we
was.
just made the decision to switch to all STEM.
I'm glad it was, because we're hearing about, not quite neighboring, but close enough in Maryland jurisdictions, like trying to actively divest in the arts in elementary school, and not on my watch. That would be horrible. So I'm glad to hear that you'd looked at that. In terms of I think this is what you meant by vertical alignment. So you're in primary years IB, then you might have a middle school pathway to that, and then to make the line sort of straight through all the levels. What happens if you're in a cluster that doesn't have any of those opportunities, or very few? Then are you put at a disadvantage when then applying to IB high school?
So it's the what of the vertical alignment and the where of the vertical alignment. And I guess we moved that slide.
So if you were
So-
going to do that, you would have to expand those opportunities in places where there's deserts.
When you're talking about PYP specifically, we currently have PYP schools that exist in both in clusters where IB exists at the middle and high school level, but also in clusters where there isn't a path, there isn't an MYP or IB program. So for
Okay.
example, Tracy's elementary school in the Southern High School feeder is a PYP
But then there's
elementary school.
yeah, I knew about that one.
Right,
Yeah,
so-
yeah.
And, we've heard
Yeah.
from the community, both that, yes, it is a great opportunity to perhaps learn about IB, but then there's a lot of, I live in Tracy's Landing. My kid's not interested in your program. We're not asking to participate, but we kind of have to based on where we live. So we're hearing some of that feedback from
Got it.
families sometimes too.
Got it. But wait, there's more. The career, what number is this? Slide 30, page 15, the career, CTE career institutes. I love that you're thinking about putting these at every comprehensive high school, as I represent one school that has a magnet and two that don't, Arundel, Savannah Park. So it's great to hear that there's going to be more opportunities at all the comprehensive high schools.
So flip flop. So on the left side of this
Yeah,
slide,
yeah.
everything listed would be offered at every comprehensive high school. That's the long-term goal. So
Okay.
starting with computer programming down to video and audio production, sorry. And then on the right side, the idea with the career institutes, which it would take us some time to build out, and transportation would be a factor,
And fun.
right? And funding. You would have a career institute. Each one of those would be offered in every network.
Every network, not every cluster. So
Each network. So think North,
Strata.
oh, got it. Thank you.
Central,
Got it.
South.
Okay. All right. I would argue there's kind of a magnet desert somewhat in District 5 presently, and there are definitely in other places in the county too. So I'm glad that you're also looking long term at placement of these programs. Oh wait, I'll get to that. Okay, so for the career institutes, then the thought would be to have students then traveling to go to those things within the networks. Okay, got it.
In a similar manner to like a CAT program. So, an Old Mill student would maintain their affiliation as a Patriot, but they could get on a bus and go to Glen Burnie to take emergency response classes for a period or two, and then either leveraging new transportation pathways or leveraging our existing ones that come back from magnet schools to neighborhood hubs, getting kids to and from those schools.
Yeah, that's great. Long term with funding and buses. super fun. Or depending on the interests, our vans and other vehicles could
Yes, ma'am.
maybe meet the moment there. I also love the idea of music hubs. I mean, you had me at music repair. Obviously, we have a need now, not in 5 or 10 years now, but I love that it's on your radar. So that's great. But I'm hoping we address this financially long before then. And then Dr. Tobin already asked the question about Apex One and where and how. So I think finally I'm good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
A pleasure.
Ms. McFarland, you have any other questions? Mr. Morgan?
Maybe two comments. Very positive CTE Career Institutes. I know we talked about it before when it was still early, and so it's good to get more information. And just using Annapolis High School as an example for both of these comments, the JROTC program there, of course, has a similar program, and there are many great students from all across that network that come together as like a family. When I talked to them, it was a family of students, and so it's really awesome to see that other opportunities will have that. And second, with that, to the magnet side of things, there are so many. I mean, some of the brightest students in our county come from the magnets. I mean, simply put, I remember being at Annapolis IB and talking to how rigorous these programs are. It was nuts. I was sitting there like, how many words? Like, so you said they said it 3 times. Like, how many words? But they build a lot of leadership. And so I hope that, when there's these conversations, the district-wide communication, obviously not at all tables, but I hope there are some student seats in these committees and everything for students, if not now, then in the future, to get their insight on making sure, especially things like IDEA. How can we make that really student-led, not only student-led but student-built? And so these students are just really great, and I would love to if there are seats at the table for them. But again, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for all the work we're doing. It's definitely well needed, and I like a lot of it. I think it's all of it. It is really great and it's moving in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Ms. Pulliam?
Okay. Based on some of the comments that Ms. Schauheim mentioned, Southern High School, definitely, when you talk about magnet deserts, it's not only a desert, it's really a desert. So and the closest thing that we have is the IB program, and that's at Tracy's, but then they have nowhere to go within the Southern feeder. So, and this is more for the folks at home to hear. So the Career Institute, is that kind of your way of saying, okay, you don't have a magnet, but we're going to give you a Career Institute? Is yeah, no?
I think that we, these plans are still in the developmental stages, but yes, it would seem to me that Southern High School would be one of the best locations for an agricultural science career institute. They already have an established program. They have the greenhouse. They have the teachers. They have the co-curricular programming there. They need more students. So this would be a way to address that, lack of capacity, reaching capacity at that school, without necessarily creating magnets at every high school, right? So then we kind of lose our neighborhood affiliations. We create unintended consequences when it comes to sports teams and things like that. So allowing students to travel from all over the schools in Network 3 down to Southern to participate in the ag program, it would function in kind of a way like a magnet program, but really more a career, stopping point. They're not there all day, every day. They're there every other day for maybe half the day.
Okay. And going back to the comment about Tracy's Elementary and the IB program, is that an opportunity there to have an agriculture, like to have a pathway? So we have the IB program there, but there's nowhere to go. I mean, unless you go all the way up to Annapolis, right? So is there a pathway for the agriculture services? And maybe the IB program at Tracy's won't stay. I don't know. It's just really odd how it's right there and there's nowhere for it
No
to
doubt.
go.
Can I just?
Yes, please.
I think one of the things I want to come back to with all of this, which was a recommendation that MSA had, is in looking at all of this, one of the things we have to make sure that we're doing is basing any movement and any establishment and any building up, taking down, really on our longitudinal data on what the needs are telling us we need to do. And so I think that I just don't want to lose sight of that, right?
Right.
And so we haven't made any decisions about that, but we have a lot of data on what people have requested through our magnet application processes, our attrition rates in our magnet programs. We have information. Mr. Rose has great information in terms of our CTE programs around course requests for pathways, not just through our CAT centers, but through course requests in our comprehensive schools that
Okay.
offer certain pathways.
Good.
And so I just don't want to lose sight of the fact that a lot of what we will try to do and establish is how do we make sure, number one, that we're using data to drive the decisions, but number two, going back to the other recommendation that we started with when it came time to aligning to, the core beliefs of our strategic plan is how are we making sure we don't have equity and access issues when it comes to all of these things, because they feel we do right now. They feel that certain students don't necessarily have access to the same things that other students have access to. So we need to combine what's our data telling us with where have we created, not intentionally, because we never do it with intention, but where have we potentially created equity and access barriers for some of our kids. So
Okay, got it.
I hope that answers your questions. Like we
Yeah.
haven't necessarily said, well, this is what we're going to do at Tracy's and this is what we're going to do here, but
Right.
we know we have to do things
Okay.
eventually. And then also take into account, how do we make sure we can transport and do this and do that, right? Like how do we
Right.
operationalize it too?
Yeah, and I know it's kind of the southern part of the county, and it's sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind. But I thank you for the Agriculture Services Institute. But it is really odd that we have the IB program and it like has nowhere to go, and so that's why. And I'm not insinuating for the viewers at home that it goes away, but where is a path for them? The other thing it was really interesting. We were just at the Talented and Gifted, the MSDE event at Crofton High School, and what we found is that they have a parents group for parents who have children that are gifted and talented, and that was interesting because Miss Dent has had a child that was talented and gifted and didn't really know what that meant, anyway, but my point is here it says the same thing: parent organizations not representative of demographics, limited participation from underserved groups. How do you see yourselves going about that piece? Like, because it is because it is a very different pathway. And then to see that, and then the other piece was that there was the multilingual. So what are your, not that you haven't gone through a lot this evening, but that does seem like an area that the parent awareness is huge, because if they're not on board, then they're going to think there's no reason to be doing this. And then for the multilingual, that just adds another layer of complexity. So not sure like how much you've looked into that, but.
So with respect to the first part of your question about the kind of the composition of some of the advisory, the parent groups, it would be like, it's like a PTA at an elementary school. Sometimes we're just satisfied with whoever shows up. And I don't want to disparage those people. They're great for, supporting the schools. They serve as chaperones for field trips, and they provide feedback to the administration about how they feel like their child is progressing through the program. But we need to be more intentional about our outreach, especially when we look around the room and we don't see diversity of, parent groups. So that's going to be something that is more of a school by school challenge, and that only comes from kind of investment and partnership from both the school leadership team, but also the Magnet or CTE program leadership team. And we are really trying to, for our Magnet programs, replicate the model that we're using at CAT North and CAT South, these program advisory committees, where we bring in someone from the industry, several people from the industry. For example, I went to one last year, it was for heavy diesel mechanics. So they had everyone from Caterpillar to MDOT come out. They also met with the selection of students who participate in that program, as well as the instructor and some parents. So it was really a beautiful kind of synergy of everyone's viewpoints, and they're all invested in the same thing, the outcomes for these students. So we want to try to replicate that at the Magnet program level, both at the district level, but also at the school level. And some of our schools are doing this in a better than others. And we need to support the schools where they're struggling to have that representation.
Okay. Now that you mentioned the PAC, would the Career Institutes also have a PAC as well?
I think that would be our long-term goal.
Okay.
Absolutely. And, by this list on the screen is right now we have over 45 CTE pathways that are available to all of our kids at schools. And depending on the teacher capacity or the availability, many of these courses go unenrolled, or unfilled. So it's hard to do 45 programs, stand them up in an efficient and effective way. So really, by narrowing our scope and to some of these career clusters and moving, to this Career Institute allows us to have 3 schools that we're supporting with respect to aeronautics, aviation, and aerospace, as opposed to 14. So that's really been the driver for kind of simplifying our program of study, and that's something that Mr. Rose and Ms. Keller have really been invested in.
Yeah, I heard the PACs are very, the People's Advisory Committee, they're very, if done right, it's a really,
Absolutely.
it's really great opportunity. So just wanted to put a plug in there
Yes, ma'am.
for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Tobin.
Yeah, thank you. To follow up on what Ms. Pulliam was raising, I have heard, certainly in the Annapolis area, concerns about a culture sometimes in the magnets that some folks in the community don't find welcoming. And so I am presuming that some of what you're talking about and some of the PD you're talking about would attempt to address that, because we need to provide access, we need the vertical alignment, but we also need to make sure that once a student arrives, they feel exactly what they should, which is that they belong there. And so I just, I assume that's what the plan is, but I just want to bring that out.
No, it's a big deal for a 14-year-old to leave his or her community where they grew up and go to a magnet school where they might not have that kind of social network. So I think historically our magnet programs have tried to lean into onboarding events in the spring after the students and families have accepted their seats, come get to know North County High School. Then they also have a series of summer bridge, experiences to introduce students. But we need to do a better job, and I think it was called out a little bit in the audit. Once they get into school and they get into the 3rd or 4th week after the shiny, welcome to the magnet program is over, and we get down to the real work and students are trying to juggle their curriculum, their assignments, we need to do a better job of providing support systemically for students who are at varying levels of readiness, right? Because if we're combining 6 middle schools into 1 high school, those students may have had some different experiences at middle school. So we need to be prepared to meet students where they are when they enter the middle and high school programming.
It would be nice, and I've spoken with Ms. Catalano about this, as we move along, to get data that gives us a sense of who's staying, students are coming and are they staying in the program, and, where are they coming from? I mean, I hear this concern, even students who are in the Annapolis cluster, but for whatever the reason, the sense is only certain kids from Annapolis go to this particular magnet, right? Which should not be the case, is again, not intentional, but somehow has become the feeling about it. So, you know, I hope at some point we can see that. The other thing I just quickly wanted to mention, I was thinking about, you mentioned, you know, finding the specialists to do these things, nanotechnology or whatever it is. For other reasons, in some previous work I did, had an opportunity to review a number of Montessori high schools around the country, and a number of them have been intentionally put into areas right around universities. And what they did was sign MOUs with institutions of higher ed, both to use labs and various other things, but also to sort of get specific time from academics. And higher education has its own issues right now. We all know that. But I think it's a moment to pool every kind of resource we can. And of course, for the schools, you're not hiring someone full time. They're already hired, but developmentally, for the reasons the Idea Hub is such a fabulous idea, you know, students in that 15 to 18-year-old stretch, it's really about finding their passion. It's really about finding that thing that's going to light them up and working with adults who can help them do that. And I sometimes wonder if it's worth, even in all the restraints we have as a big public education system, just beginning to reimagine what it is to acquire that expertise without having to go through all the normal processes we do. And please, to anybody, I'm going to get the emails. I'm not suggesting we put things out to vendors here. That's not my suggestion. My suggestion is, realistically, if we have very specific needs, where are we going to find that expertise that can serve our students, but is exceedingly hard to maintain and maybe not be something we have to maintain in the same way. So it's just a thought that occurred to me as I was thinking about this. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. McDermott, you have anything? All right, so I have a couple of things. I know you can't believe it after everybody else, right? Like, what could she possibly have? Well, mine's is a little bit different. So first of all, I want to say to all of the award winners for the distinction, congratulations. What an honor. I looked at the Magnet Schools of America website, which is really cool. I think Maryland, we must have been the only school that was evaluated, or only LEA that was evaluated, because we racked up, right? And the only schools that won. So that's kudos to everybody here that put in the work to get the CTE program up and running. Also on the website was a student from Brooklyn Park Middle School that won the poster for arts, which I thought was even more, you know, as my husband say, even more cooler. And so I think that is really neat. So I'm excited about, I love excellence. I love things that highlight and showcase our excellence, and that we are doing great. What I do have, though, is my question. So let's get there. So you said 22 years, 23. I'm not counting that. This has not been done over the course of these years, right? And so what really gave me hot flashes was when you said, and I quote, "We just got it in just in time before the grant was pulled from us." So going forward, and this may be a question to, you know, Matt Stansky, who's not here tonight, realizing the importance of this and the fact that over the course of the 7 slides of implementation, you're trying to implement 22 years of work. And so I don't know how we fund this going forward, but I think that's a long time to go without it. So what are your thoughts and ideas on how we do this in, you know, I don't know, maybe 5-year increments? I don't know what the right answer is, but I know 22 isn't. Right. And so how do we fund that? Do we take the great work that we've done and go after grants to be able to get this? How do we do that? And you can say I don't have an answer to
No,
that.
I mean, I think the answer lies in all of those. Some more research for us about grants. I think we have to, given our current budget outlook, we have to look within, and that's what the magnet programs have done. We have a long-standing relationship with MSA, 6 years that I've been working with them, and I know we can use this audit as a baseline, and especially as we start to track some of our responses to audits, we can invite that team back. Hopefully at a discounted cost, not so much like repeating the initial audit, but in some key areas, maybe we want them to come back and really examine our lottery process after we feel like we've done the best job we can, synthesizing their feedback and creating a structure that is more reflective of their standards. To your point, we can't wait another 23 years to do something like this. So I think it lies somewhere in maybe the 4 to 5 year range. We kind of work with that organization or the state to come out and look at some of our programs. I'm not afraid to invite people from outside to come in and look. So whether it's maybe some higher ed partners, it doesn't just necessarily have to be magnet schools. And I think a big outcome of our program advisory councils can be those industry and higher ed partners coming in and holding us accountable for what we talk about that we're doing, but are we actually doing it when they show up to see it? So I think it could take a variety of formats. Certainly we'd want to err towards the most, fiscally conservative approach, but this is valuable information.
And I think the other thing I would say is, and I'm really proud of the team for doing this, is I think they started with, what are the things we can do right now based on this audit that don't require us to necessarily invest money, that is just a matter of us reflecting on the feedback that we got that's within our locus of control, from a planning standpoint or a collaboration standpoint, and so I think that's the approach, and then how do we plot this out over years and really look at it from a fiscal impact versus no fiscal impact standpoint. Getting a multi-stakeholder group together to really examine our application process doesn't cost us anything. And it's something that hasn't been done in a really long time. And it's something that we need to do. And so we're acting on that right now, which was a recommendation. So I think that was a lot of the initial work that has been done since we got the audit, is really evaluating what are those things that we can respond to in the immediate that we know we need to do and we can do, and being able to just plot those out. And they've done a really good job of that. They really have.
So I want to applaud you all for doing that. But at the course of what I just heard, it's going to be a cost, right, for us to finish this implementation. So the realism of this, right, is not for you to evade the question about funding. It's really for me to say is that if we do, our job is to advocate for the resources needed for our school to go from good to great, right? That's our job. That's the board's job. And so I don't want you to try to figure this out on your own. I'm really making a statement here because we are getting ready to go into the budget, right? And so we see all of this. I mean, I'm excited about the career institutes. I'm excited about the professional development that we're talking about doing for our educators. That I'm even more excited about it. You're saying we're going to open this up to all of our networks. Oh my gosh, can you think how imagine that is? But I know that there's a price tag to that, right? And so the realism is that we really have to fund this, and we really need to take time out as we're doing this and really kind of fund out what this really looks like in the future. And I'm not telling you to do it in a sprint. Mm-hmm. I'm saying, I look at the blueprint all the time. I am nervous about trying to figure out how to get 45% of our high school students graduated with a registered apprentice or what is it, industry?
IRC, industry recognized credential.
I'm literally worried about that, right? Because this is 2026. We're talking 4 years from now. And we're at the start of just trying to figure this out, right? So there's all these things that are competing with us going from good to great and offering all these things to our students. But everybody always forgets that it's a price tag that goes with that. So I'm just saying, think about that. The other question that I had for you was, we talked about the wait list, yes, right? And so if we were in, I love the word, I think on one of the slides you had reimagine, right? Reimagine the lottery. So that you started it, not me. So I'm gonna reimagine the lottery, right? And that wait list is, you said there's 45 disciplines, right? So can we reimagine the lottery? So maybe you didn't get your first choice, but you got your second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth choice,
Mhm.
right? So that there could be more access to these programs. And so as you reimagine what the lottery looks like, you know, maybe everything, I mean, I literally wanted to be an airline student when they put me in the military. They put me inside someone that fills up the aircraft, right? So they reimagined what my dream was to be an aircraft, you know, work with aircraft. I was happy about it because I got a chance to work with aircraft, learn how to fly an aircraft. But I certainly wanted to be an airline stewardess. Long way from that, right? And so what I'm saying is that, yes, my career path was another way, but it was exciting for the fact that someone gave me the opportunity to look at something else. So if you don't get A, B, or C, maybe there's some other thing. So I'm asking you to reimagine what that lottery looks like.
ma'am.
And then my last question to you is that I don't know how we can do this, but I do think one of my top priorities would be to invest in the professional development of not only our teachers and our staff, but if we are going to expand this program, I think you start with that professional development and invest in that professional development. And we figure out a way early on how to fund that so that, you know, we actually have the subject matter experts and then we bring the students along, which will make things a lot easier instead of trying to build the ship and sell it at the same time. That's all I have. Is there any other board members that have any alibis before I close it out? All right, Dr. Gill, I'll leave it over to you for final comments.
Yeah, I just wrote down a couple of things, and you know, I think we talked a lot about a lot of equity was mentioned, whether it's from the board or even on our side, and I think that's very important that we take that into account. But I also don't want us. I just think we have to be careful how we use that word. I think sometimes, you know, it's good intentions, but it could also not enable us to do the work that needs to be done. And I'll use transportation as an example. And I've had this conversation with Dawn, so I'm just going to be very clear. Dawn says we want to see more kids that are over in this cluster have an opportunity to make their way over to South or Southern to take advantage of the FFA program. We've also heard kids come here and speak. And the reality is, just like we did ROTC, you know, we just because I don't want perfect to get in the way of a good opportunity. I think that's what I'm trying to say, right? And I think for me, and this is what I told Dawn, if equity is something that we all value, then there are times where the school district budget just won't support us being able to do it in a perfect manner. So this is what I said to Dawn. We really want to make this happen. This is where we go out and we talk to funders. We talk to people that have money. And we say, if we want to bus kids from the Annapolis cluster that have interest in wanting to take advantage of ag or some of those programs, this is the work that we have to do. And I just don't, so for me, it's just important. And then I think it ends up backing us into a corner. If the interest is that high, it puts us in a position where now we have to say the demand is there, but until we see the demand, right, it is hard to go right into it saying we're going to be able to provide universal transportation. And so when they brought up the suggestion to me about, well, we did this with ROTC and it ended up working out, right? It's a pretty strong program where we're now busing kids in. I think this gives us that opportunity to at least get started with some things that our budget may not be able to support, but collectively, I think we can go out here and we can figure out, is it an opportunity to raise money to bus kids that we may need? So I just want to put that out put that out in the space, okay? But thank you all, wonderful questions, and thank you all for your presentation. And if we could do all of this, man, it's a game changer. But I do know realistically, money is a barrier, and I will be sitting down with some potential funders here in the very near future that have already approached me about some ways that they can support us. Thank you all.
Thank you, and good night, everybody.
All right, good night. You rushing us out.